And I would like to welcome everyone to our December 7th Canvassing Board meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to request the Canvassing Board to set a date and time for a recount, which has been requested by a political party representative. The recount has been requested for the governor's race for precinct 25, which is Orcas East. And I believe Mylene has some background that she'd like to share as well.
Well, I don't have background on this request. I have additional background on the court case that Randy sent us last week. Did you want to talk about that, Randy?
Well, yeah, there are a couple of things to talk about here, but let's find out first if the full deposit has been paid. Have you received an additional deposit?
We have not received the additional deposit at this point.
Mylene, have you?
No, I wouldn't have it. It would come to the elections office.
Yeah, it's because she was directed to pay the additional deposit to the canvassing board, so that means Bill could have received it, or I could have received it, or you could have. And Bill, you didn't get it.
I ain't got it.
I didn't get it. And so I think the first question is whether the application is sufficient in the absence of the full price of the deposit. And so I think that's a preliminary question we have to address before we get to setting a date and time for a recount. So I have a few remarks about that, as well as recount in general. As far as I know, this is the only precinct for which a recount in the governor's race is being requested. And there aren't a combination of precincts being requested that I'm aware of that would change the outcome of the governor's race. Governor Jay Inslee received 56.56% of the vote. The challenger, Lauren Culp, received 43.12%. Jay Inslee received 545,000 more votes than Lauren Culp. The precinct at issue here has 928 voters, and 711 votes went for Jay Inslee and 199 went for Lauren Culp. So even if every vote were turned around through a recount, it would only change the outcome by 711 votes and would not change the outcome of the race. It would only change the vote. And so it would not trigger any further obligation on the part of the Secretary of State. And we can take that into consideration as we evaluate what we're going to do next. We should also recognize that we're in a pandemic. And while the governor has said canvass boards need to do their work, they should also do their work consistent with the rules of the Department of Health. That means we need to have a place that's big enough to do all this after inviting all the people that need to come. And there's a lot of them. There's parties, the candidates, their attorneys, and perhaps the state party as well as the local party, given that this is a local party that's asking for this and a state party candidate that's at issue. So I begin back at the beginning about payment. And there's a statute that's very specific about payment. Payment is to be made by the person filing the application. This is RCW 29A 64030.
Wait, say that again?
29A 64030. The payment is to be made by the person filing an application. That would mean Cynthia Carter. And a deposit at the same time as filing the application. So there's a timing issue as well. And it's to be made in a certain form, that is by cash or certified check. And then there are two amounts specified a sum equal to 25 cents if it's for a manual recount, and 15 cents if it's for a vote tally machine recount. So, based upon the information given to us by the Secretary of State, the deposit is $3.25 short, equivalent to 13 ballots. And she was told of this immediately by the Secretary of State and told also to deposit the remaining balance with the canvass board. And I would say that it had to occur by now. That is the time we met to do this today. And in the absence of a deposit, and with these kind of specificities, I'm uncomfortable moving forward with a manual recount. Now, the Secretary of State has directed us to do a recount, but the Secretary of State didn't say what kind of recount. The Secretary of State did not say do a manual recount. She just said a recount. And so I would propose that we do a recount by vote tally machine instead of by manual, because the deposit is insufficient. And for the other considerations, given the fact that it will not change the outcome of the race, and the fact that it will we're operating in the time of a pandemic, and we have limited space available. As an alternative, yes. So that's my introductory remark and my thought of how to proceed. I believe that the court decision that I passed around involving the Spokane auditor, it's called Zapotopke versus Vicky Dalton. It's from 2012. It involves the exact statutes at issue here. And also in that case, the applicant was asking for a recount in a manner that was not provided by statute, given the circumstances. And the canvass board had discretion and wasn't mandated to do the recount in the way that the applicant requested. And so I think that case gives us authority to choose not to do a manual recount under these circumstances. And I'm proposing to do a machine tally recount instead. So there's my initial thoughts.
I am not acting as a member of the canvassing board right now because I'm not physically present. I have delegated that to Natasha Warmanhoven, Chief Deputy Auditor. However, I would like to comment on what the prosecutor has said. First of all, I don't believe the court case is relevant here because the request there, and I did speak to the Spokane County Auditor about this, the request there was a recount of certain batches, and the lowest reporting unit for an election is precincts. And so the reason the auditor in that case declined to conduct the recount was that it could not be conducted in the manner in which the requester requested. And that did go to court, and the court found in favor of the auditor. However, the matter of not having received full payment is of concern to me because it does say that the payment has to be made at the time the request is made, and I'm not sure how long I don't know why she underpaid. I assume she was given the correct amount. And I don't know how long we have to wait. I mean, clearly we can't conduct a recount until a full deposit has been made. What are your thoughts on that, Randy?
I think today's the day. She was notified. We have received a copy of a letter from the Secretary of State. To Cynthia Carter. It states that, quote, the deposit required is $232. Therefore, your initial check of $228.75 is $3.25 short. And then it says, please send the additional required funds to the San Juan County Auditor in order to be compliant with the required deposit. So I submit that the application is not complete, and we're not under a duty to, and this is where the case comes in, you're not under a duty to conduct a recount where the application doesn't follow law.
And how is that fee calculated?
The fee is determined by statute. There's a statute very specific about that.
On the number of votes?
No, it says on the number of ballots.
Ballots, I mean.
And so if somebody leaves a ballot blank, we're
pay
still
for it.
going to examine that.
Of course.
And if somebody votes for a write-in, we're still going to examine that. And so every ballot cast counts. And the vote tally sheets show that 928 ballots were cast.
Right. She had to pay so many pennies per ballot.
For a manual recount, it's 25 cents. For a machine tally recount, it's 15 cents.
Right, so she's
So
short on manual, but she's got sufficient for.
She's got enough money for the machine recount, and it's timely for a machine recount. So that's why I'm saying, go ahead with the machine recount. And we satisfy the direction from the Secretary of State as well. The Secretary of State, interestingly, in their direction, did not tell us how to recount. It just says, we are directed to recount the votes.
Did the requester specify why they requested the recount?
No, it's a very simple sentence from the requester. The requester simply states this: I, Cynthia Carter, as an officer and elected state committee woman of the San Juan County Republican Party, do hereby request a manual recount of the Orcas East precinct, known as Precinct 25, located in San Juan County, Washington, for the governor's race in the general election in November 2020, period. Signed, Cynthia M. Carter, and she gives her address on Discovery Way, East Sound, dated November 26, November 20, and also there's a receipt stamp showing that was timely received at the Office of the Secretary of State on December 1, 2020, which is the same day that the Secretary of State certified the election.
So if we did a manual recount, would we do a machine recount as well?
No.
No,
You do one or the other, you don't necessarily do both.
yeah, it's a very different process. The manual recount requires a segregation of the ballots, an establishment of voting boards made up of Democrat and Republican parties, and then they divide them into piles, count them, and report back. Discrepancies must be resolved by the canvassing board.
Got it.
And Amy, you have calculated a estimated cost of the recount, right?
Yes.
Can you share that with the canvassing board, please?
Sure,
Yes,
I'm anxious to know that.
absolutely. Yes, so the estimated cost for a manual recount that I have put together comes to $1,744 and a few cents. And that includes, sorry?
And the requester would be obligated to pay all of that, correct?
Correct.
Yes. The way the statute reads is the canvass board determines the cost based upon the information provided by the auditor as to the time and expenses of conducting the recount. And the full price is paid by the applicant and or to be paid, and what is received is simply a deposit. And she was told that it might be, the deposit is substantially less than the full amount that would likely be paid or charged. And then there's only provisions for not paying the deposit if it changes the outcome of the race. And of course, there will be no change to the outcome of the race. We know that. It's an impossibility. The numbers don't lie.
So what's your estimate on a machine recount?
I did not put the
You didn't do
machine
that,
recount
okay.
estimate together.
But less than that.
I
The
know,
machine recount,
Go ahead,
machine
Henry.
recount, go ahead.
Oh, in my understanding, the machine recount would take more time because it would require putting all of the batches through our machine again and resolving them in the way that we do for a regular election. And then we would need to transfer that information over to the tally machine to produce a report. We would still have to have teams of 18 members come over to help me resolve. I can't do that by myself. There has to be more than one person. So I believe that it would take more time.
I'm not sure that's correct. My understanding is no new resolutions are made. All the resolutions that have already occurred with respect to every ballot are accepted.
Correct.
So no new
However,
resolution is made.
correct. However, when we put the ballots through the tally machine, we still have to go through and mark, okay, this was an overvote, this was an undervote. That all still has to be re-accepted because we're not just looking at what went through the machine originally, right? We're putting it through the machine again. And so when I say resolve, I don't mean make a decision. What I mean is we have to tell the machine, yes, this is what this vote is, right? It's either an undervote, an overvote, it's fine to be accepted as it is, or there was a write-in.
But aren't we just tallying the one race?
We're just telling the one race for the Orcas East precinct.
I understand. I mean, so over and under votes would only apply to that one race.
That's correct.
Okay. Not all races on those ballots.
Correct.
So there were just 13 of those undervotes.
So
But you would also, don't you also go through the step of segregating under both the
yes,
machine
I believe
tally
so.
recount as well as the manual recount? You have to find the ballots
Right.
from the precinct. We don't keep the ballots together because this is a vote by mail election. All the
Oh,
ballots
really? You don't
are-
have them separated by precinct?
The ballots are separated by batches.
Right.
And so we would have to go through all of the batches that have precinct 25 ballots in them and pull out all of those ballots, which is what we would have to do for a manual recount as well.
Manual or machine recount, that's a step that has to occur.
Okay. I thought you kept them by precinct.
But the machine recount uses the images that are already in the machine. It does not look at the ballots. It just tallies based upon the scanned images that are already in the machine. And you do a new,
Oh, really?
yeah, you do not look at the,
It doesn't look at the ballots
it doesn't
again.
look at the ballots again. Just use the scanned images, as I understand it, after reading through it. So it should be much faster. And it requires fewer people, so we have space to operate in.
I'm not sure if we can use the originally scanned images. Because if that were the case, we would have to go through the batches on the machine and pull out the ballots that way, and I'm not certain that that is possible. I mean, we could, but it would take even more time than pulling all of the ballots by hand. The addition is admin time, not actual processing time.
I think the request was for a manual recount. And
Yes.
We either conduct a manual recount or we don't conduct a recount.
So, Marlene, if I heard you right, you're recommending that we deny the application then?
What I would recommend is a conditional approval. Conditional on our having that money in hand by the end of the day.
Seeing how we're talking $3.25.
Yes. Yes, you are right, Randy. The results of this recount will not change the election. And it is unfortunate that state law allows recounts to be requested in any case for any reason. But the fact is, state law does. And by the way, Snohomish County has 3 precincts for which they will be conducting recounts. Same thing. It is, but in the interest of transparency, I would rather do it than not do it.
Yeah.
I would definitely assess the full cost to the requester and expect payment. But the fact that she has not complied with the process for requesting the recount is why I would approve it conditionally. Again, conditioned on getting that money by the end of the day.
So if we're gonna do a manual recount, how many people do we need to invite to come and
We,
facilitate that?
sure, facilitate, you mean actually do the processing? 2 teams of 2, I believe, will be able to accomplish it in one day. So
Would that be like one Democrat and one Republican in each team?
that would be the goal, right? But since we are in a pandemic, we're limited to the folks who are comfortable coming in.
Then I understand.
So but in addition to them, you have the observers who are
Well, it's an open process.
but there are some people who are invited.
Right, okay.
Yes, so
And
the
the
requester,
invitation goes out to the candidate.
Right.
The losing candidate, the winning candidate, their attorneys, and the candidates and their attorneys are allowed to be present.
Right.
The parties and their attorneys are allowed to have observers, in addition to being part of the county board. And then the public is permitted to attend. So it could be 12 people.
and we have space for, I believe, 2 people to be socially distanced in this area here. And we're also going to be broadcasting on YouTube that recount. So we can always tell them if there's not enough space, you can watch on YouTube, and there is a ranking system for who to let in to observe first.
It is, but I consider this space inadequate for a pandemic recount.
I understand.
And I think we should try to find a different space if we proceed to a recount. But
Well,
I would
Randy,
suggest, yes,
that is not your choice. We have conducted processing, which is a much grander scale in this room, and we are comfortable with where we are.
I appreciate that, Mylene, but it is the canvas board who determines the date, time, and place. I'm a member of the canvas board. I can raise my question about it. It's not the auditor.
all right, so, but you'd have to take, my understanding is you'd have to take all the ballots then to whatever the location is,
Correct.
because they're not sorted by precinct.
No.
So you'd have to take, I don't know, 15, or whatever, 13, 15,000.
But they're right there. They're in
Understood.
cages.
I understand they're engaged, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, moving it to a different location
It's an issue.
would be an issue.
Yeah, that would add more time.
No, exactly, absolutely. Whereas if you just had, a couple of stacks of East Orcas, you would leave all the other ones locked up,
Correct.
right? But they're not sorted that way.
There's a sorting task, and that's the first task that has to be done, and then there's the counting task.
Right.
Two separate tasks.
So would you, literally, you take all the ballots, extract out the East Orcas precinct
Yes,
first,
correct.
which
How's that done?
redefines the batches then, right? Because you've removed them from the batches.
Yes, we have a tag that goes on each batch that we have pulled ballots from that says these ballots were pulled from this batch on this date for this purpose, right? So then the original batches go back in the boxes that they were originally in, those boxes get sealed, and after all of that has been completed, we then look at the ballots that have been pulled only.
And you don't put them back in the original batches?
We do not.
Okay.
Does the ballot batch report show what precincts they're
It
from?
does, yes.
So you only have to pull the ballots or the batches with precinct.
Yes, and I've already gone through and figured out which ones those are. It's at least half of the batches that we have processed.
Okay. Okay. So then theoretically, only those ballots would have to be taken off-site if we went to a different location?
No, the entire process is open to the public and observers. So if we were to move the location of the recount, I believe it would need to be for the entire process.
So you would take all the ballots before you extract it?
Okay, that's very helpful to know more about the recounting process.
So opinions, Natasha?
Well, I mean, the RCW is very clear in the wording of it has to be received at the time of the application, and this applicant is short the deposit and they are requesting an annual. So I agree. I mean, at this time, we certainly could conditionally approve the application and with the deadline of by the end of today, but they have missed the deadline. They were supposed to deposit with the application and that was on first. So, I mean, yeah, this is a new situation for me, but they have missed the deadline. But then I agree that to be transparent, we should give them the opportunity to make that $3.25 deposit and set. Now this says set a date and time for the recount. Randy, is it in the RCW that the canvassing board also sets the place?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was just trying to find that, but
So could we not then say, as Mylene suggested, conditionally, we set a place and time and date and time, place, date and time, assuming that she completes the deposit by, I don't know, close of business today.
That's possible. I would propose that we reject the application.
But then we'd have to meet again.
And yeah, and we recess the meeting for one day, just recess. And we can come back tomorrow at this date and time. And if there's a desire on the part of two members to give her additional time after she's already been given time to cure, then so be it. But I say it should be rejected unless the fee is paid in full by a certain date and time. And therefore, we wouldn't have to meet in the event that
It's not paid.
the payment doesn't occur.
Do we have a target place, date and time?
Yes, I was hoping to begin the recount at 9 a.m. on Wednesday the 9th. However, if we're going to recess, that would need to be changed because it is a process that needs to have a notification period of 2 days.
Now, the notice has to go widely to people
Yep.
in eastern Washington and where Mr. Colt lives, and to the governor's office or to the governor in Olympia, as well as
Yep.
to the local people here. There is no date. Okay, there's no hurry on this. There is no date specified in statute or by the Secretary of State in which to accomplish this task. And
Other than we can't certify the election until it's done.
no, the election has been
It's
certified.
not certified. It would be the recount that you would certify after it's
Okay.
complete.
There is no date specified for doing this.
Got it, okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, we could do it in March. When the pandemic's over, we pull out the ballots, we all get together, we have a nice comfortable recount. We give the new number, if there's any, to the Secretary of State. She issues a new amended certificate and everybody continues on, but there's no change in the outcome. And there's also some wisdom in letting the other counties go first. If there are some other counties that are doing this,